The Serengeti stretched endlessly under the moon's soft glow, a vast expanse of golden grass swaying under the cool night breeze. The only sounds were the distant calls of hyenas, the occasional hoot of an owl, and the rhythmic chirping of crickets. It was a night like any other in the heart of the wild, until Ranger Jack Collins heard it. A cry. Weak, desperate, not the high-pitched chatter of a nocturnal bird, nor the sharp yelps of a distant predator. This was different. It was the sound of something young, something lost. Jack tightened his grip on his flashlight, sweeping the beam across the tall grass. The Serengeti was no place for the weak. A cub left alone would not survive till dawn. Moving cautiously, he followed the sound, his boots crunching softly against the dry earth. Then he saw them, two tiny eyes, wide with fear, reflecting back at him in the darkness. His heart clenched. Kneeling down, Jack parted the grass. A lion cub no older than 3 weeks lay curled up and trembling. Its golden fur was coated in dust, its ribs faintly visible beneath the thin skin. The little one could barely lift its head, but it still fought to make those desperate cries for help. Jack's trained eyes scanned the ground. The tracks told a tragic story. Signs of a struggle, deep claw marks in the dirt, tire tracks leading away into the night, and worse, bullet casings. His stomach turned. Poachers. Jack exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. He had seen this before, but it never got easier. Somewhere out there, this cub's mother had fought and lost, and now her baby was left to die. The cub let out another weak cry, softer this time. It was running out of strength. Jack knew what had to be done. "I'm sorry, little one," he murmured, gently wrapping the cub in his jacket, "but I promise, this isn't the end of your story." Little did he know, this moment would lead to one of the most extraordinary friendships ever witnessed in the animal kingdom. Jack cradled the tiny cub against his chest, feeling the weak rise and fall of its breath beneath his fingers. The cub barely moved, its body limp from exhaustion. Every second counted. Jack stood, scanning the dark plains of the Serengeti. He knew the dangers that lurked in the shadows: hyenas, leopards, even rogue lions. If he hesitated, this little one wouldn't see the morning. With careful steps, he made his way back to his truck, his pulse pounding in his ears. As soon as he reached the vehicle, he gently placed the cub inside his jacket on the passenger seat. It let out a faint, pitiful whimper. Jack reached over, letting his fingers graze its tiny head. "Hang in there, buddy," he whispered. He jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, shattering the stillness of the night. Dust kicked up behind the truck as he floored the gas pedal, speeding down the rugged dirt road. The Wildlife Rescue Center was 40 miles away, a long, rough drive under normal conditions. But tonight, every bump, every pothole felt like a race against time. Jack grabbed his radio, his voice steady but urgent. "Olivia, it's Jack. I've got a lion cub, maybe 3 weeks old. He's weak, dehydrated, and in bad shape. I need you ready when I get there." There was a brief crackle before Olivia Carter's voice came through, sharp and focused. "Got it. I'll have the team standing by. Just get him here fast." Jack clenched the steering wheel. "I'm already on it." The drive stretched on, every minute feeling like an eternity. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching over to check on the cub. It was still breathing, but barely. Finally, headlights cut through the darkness ahead, the rescue center. Jack pulled up hard, dust swirling as the truck skidded to a stop. Before he could even open his door, Olivia and 2 other caretakers were running toward him, their faces etched with concern. "He's barely responsive," Jack said, handing over the tiny bundle. Olivia took the cub, her expression softening as she felt its fragile weight. "We've got him. Let's move." The team rushed inside, disappearing into the emergency treatment room. Jack exhaled, leaning against the truck. The hardest part was over. But for the little cub, The real fight had just begun. Inside the Wildlife Rescue Center, the air was thick with urgency. The cub, now named Koda, lay motionless on the treatment table, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. His golden fur, once meant to blend seamlessly with the Serengeti's sun-drenched grasses, was now dull and matted. His body was frail, his limbs limp. Dr. Olivia Carter moved swiftly, running her hands over Koda's fragile frame, checking for injuries. "He's severely dehydrated," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need fluids, now." One of the vet techs handed her a syringe fitted with a feeding tube. Olivia gently inserted the tube into Koda's mouth, letting small amounts of an electrolyte solution trickle down his throat. At first, nothing happened. Then, a tiny swallow. "That's it, little guy," she murmured. "Fight for me." Over the next hour, the team worked tirelessly. A warm blanket wrapped around Koda's tiny frame, simulating the warmth he would have felt nestled against his mother's fur. A soft heartbeat sound played from a speaker, mimicking the soothing rhythm he had lost. Every 2 hours, day and night, someone was there to feed him, stroke his fur, and whisper words of encouragement. But despite their efforts, Koda refused to settle. He whimpered weakly, his tiny paws kneading at the blanket, his dull eyes searching for something, someone who wasn't there. "He's grieving," Olivia said softly, watching the little cub. "He's not just hungry, he's lonely." Jack stood by the doorway, arms crossed, watching in silence. He had seen orphaned animals before, but something about Koda hit different. Maybe it was the way he fought to stay awake, as if afraid he'd wake up alone again. Maybe it was the way he curled up into the smallest possible ball, as if trying to disappear. "Olivia," Jack said after a long pause, "he needs more than just food and medicine." She sighed, nodding. "I know. But what he really needs we can't give him." Jack met her gaze. "Then we find another way." The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of the monitors tracking Koda's fragile heartbeat. None of them knew it yet, but the answer to Koda's pain wasn't in medicine or round-the-clock care. It was waiting for him just outside, in the form of an unexpected mother, with a golden coat and a heart big enough for them all. For days, the team at the Wildlife Rescue Center did everything they could to comfort Koda. He was eating more, growing a little stronger, but something was still missing. He remained restless, his tiny whimpers echoing through the facility at night. No amount of warm blankets or soft heartbeats played through speakers could replace what he had lost, a mother's love. It was Sophia, one of the senior caretakers, who first had the idea. She stood by Koda's enclosure, watching as he curled into himself, eyes barely open. "What if," she hesitated, "we introduced him to Daisy?" Dr. Olivia turned, raising an eyebrow. "Daisy? The Labrador?" Jack, leaning against the doorframe, straightened at the mention of the dog. Daisy was a gentle, nurturing Labrador who had just given birth to a litter of puppies 2 weeks earlier. She was famous around the center, not just for her kindness, but for her uncanny ability to sense when an animal needed comfort. "Think about it," Sophia continued. "He doesn't need food or medicine anymore. He needs warmth, safety, a family. Daisy's been a mother before. Maybe she can help." The room fell silent as the idea sank in. A lion cub with a domestic dog. It was unheard of. The risks were obvious. What if Daisy rejected him? What if her instincts told her this strange, unfamiliar creature wasn't one of her own? But Jack looked down at Koda, who had barely moved since morning, and knew they had to try. So they did. That evening, they carefully carried Koda toward Daisy's den, where she was resting with her puppies. The golden retriever lifted her head, ears perking up as the humans approached. Her soft brown eyes studied them with curiosity, then flicked to the tiny bundle in Jack's arms. Koda stirred, letting out a weak, pitiful cry. And then something incredible happened. Daisy wagged her tail. Slowly, she got up and padded toward Jack. She sniffed the air, then pressed her wet nose gently against Koda's fur. The cub tensed, then let out a tiny, uncertain purr. Taking a leap of faith, Sophia carefully placed Koda among Daisy's puppies. The team held their breath, ready to intervene at the first sign of trouble. But there was none. Instead, Daisy licked Koda's face, just as she did with her own pups. She nudged him closer, circling around the litter, as if making room for one more. And for the first time since losing his mother, Koda stopped crying. He nestled against Daisy's warm fur, closed his eyes, and drifted into the deepest sleep he had ever known. From the moment Daisy accepted Koda as one of her own, everything changed. At first, the rescue team watched anxiously, unsure how a lion cub would fit into a litter of tiny Labrador puppies. But Daisy made sure Koda was treated no differently. If he strayed too far, she'd gently grab him by the scruff and pull him back. If he cried, she'd nuzzle him until he calmed. If one of the puppies got more attention than him, she'd make sure to give Koda an extra lick, just to remind him he was loved. It didn't take long before Koda started acting less like a lion cub and more like a puppy. At first, he was cautious, watching his siblings from a distance as they tumbled over one another, their tails wagging furiously. He didn't quite understand their games, but curiosity got the best of him. Then, one day, one of the puppies, a tiny ball of fluff named Buddy, brought Koda a rope toy. The little lion cub stared at it, then at Buddy, then back at the toy. The humans held their breath, unsure of what he'd do. And then he batted at it with his paw. Buddy barked excitedly and wiggled his entire body. Daisy let out a soft woof, as if approving the new friendship. That was all it took. Koda was no longer just a lion cub. He was part of the pack. From that day forward, he played like a puppy, wrestled like a puppy, and even tried to bark like a puppy. The first time he attempted it, the sound that came out was a mix between a growl and a squeaky yelp, making everyone laugh. Even Daisy tilted her head as if saying, "Nice try, kid." But Koda didn't care. He was happy. Every morning he'd wake up nestled between Daisy and the rest of the litter, their warm bodies pressed together in what the staff lovingly called a puppy puddle. At feeding time, even though he had his own special milk bottle, Koda would still nuzzle against Daisy, pretending to nurse just like the puppies did. And when Daisy went for her daily walks, Koda followed right behind her, his big paws struggling to match her smaller, more graceful steps. He was still growing faster and larger than his puppy siblings, but he didn't seem to notice. To Koda, he was just another dog in the family. The sanctuary staff couldn't believe their eyes. A lion cub raised by a Labrador learning to be a dog. It was something they had never seen before. But for Daisy and Koda, it wasn't strange at all. It was just love. As weeks turned into months, Koda continued to grow. But something funny happened. He didn't seem to realize he was different. At 6 months old, Koda was already twice the size of Daisy. His paws were massive, his limbs strong, his muscles developing with each passing day. While his puppy siblings remained small and compact, Koda was becoming a lion in every sense of the word. But in his heart, he was still a Labrador. Every morning, as soon as the sun rose over the sanctuary, Koda would wake up and bound over to Daisy, tail swishing just like a happy pup. He would nuzzle against her, rumbling his deep purr, while she responded with a few affectionate licks to his nose. To an outsider, it was a bizarre sight, a 100-pound lion cub acting like an overgrown puppy around his much smaller dog mom. But to Koda and Daisy, it was completely normal. Koda still followed Daisy everywhere. When Daisy sniffed at a patch of grass, Koda would stop and sniff it too, pretending to be just as interested. If Daisy barked at a bird fluttering by, Koda would let out a low rumbling growl as if trying to join in. One time the sanctuary staff watched in amusement as Koda tried to dig a hole beside Daisy, imitating her every movement. His giant paws, however, sent dirt flying everywhere, covering the puppies in dust. Daisy let out a firm bark and Koda immediately flopped onto his back in submission, just like a guilty dog. Mealtime was even more incredible to watch. By now, Koda was eating a lion's diet, fresh meat specially prepared by the caretakers. But out of habit, he would still wait for Daisy to eat first, just as he had learned when he was a tiny cub. And sometimes, just sometimes, he would even try to push the best pieces of his food toward her as if offering to share. But the most heartwarming moments were during the storms. Lions aren't typically afraid of thunder, but Koda still ran to Daisy whenever he heard it. He would curl up beside her, tucking his huge body into a tight ball, pressing close to the only mother he had ever known. And Daisy? She would just lick his head and let him snuggle in, no matter how big he got. The sanctuary staff had never seen anything like it. Most wild animals grow distant from their surrogate mothers as they mature, but not Koda. Even as he grew stronger, more powerful, more lion than dog, his heart still belonged to Daisy. By the time Koda was a year old, he was no longer just a cub. He was a lion in every sense of the word. His shoulders were broad, his golden coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his once soft purrs had deepened into the low, rumbling calls of a growing male lion. But despite his size, despite his instincts, one thing remained unchanged. He was still Daisy's baby. Every morning before doing anything else, Koda would go looking for Daisy. His deep rumbles echoed across the sanctuary as he called for her, his massive paws kicking up dust as he hurried toward their usual meeting spot. And when Daisy arrived, tail wagging, Koda would light up like a puppy seeing his mother after time apart. The sanctuary staff never grew tired of watching their interactions. One of the most incredible things about their bond was how Koda seemed to understand his own strength. Even though he was now over 300 pounds, towering over Daisy, he was always gentle. When they played, he never used his full power. Instead of tackling her, he'd simply nudge her with his head. Instead of biting, he'd rest his huge paw on her back, careful not to press too hard. And Daisy? She treated him no differently than she did when he was a tiny cub. When he got too excited, all it took was a soft woof from Daisy, and Koda would immediately settle down, lowering his ears like a scolded puppy. If he tried to pounce on her in play, she'd give him a quick bark, and just like that, Koda would stop in his tracks, as if remembering who was in charge. Visitors to the sanctuary were in awe. They came expecting to see wild animals in their natural state, but instead they witnessed something even more powerful, a full-grown lion treating a dog as his mother. They watched as Koda walked alongside Daisy, adjusting his steps to match hers. They saw how he let her win their tug-of-war games, even though he could easily overpower her. They marveled at how, despite his instincts, despite everything nature had designed him to be, Koda's heart belonged to Daisy. His story spread beyond the sanctuary. News stations picked it up. Videos of Koda and Daisy together went viral. People from all over the world were drawn to this incredible bond, a love that defied species, logic, and expectations. A sign was placed at the entrance of the sanctuary with a simple but powerful message. Love knows no boundaries, neither should kindness. And every evening as the sun dipped below the horizon, Koda and Daisy would lie together in the golden grass, side by side, proving to the world that love, in its purest form, has no limits. Koda's story was more than just a heartwarming tale of an unlikely bond. It became a powerful message about the importance of wildlife conservation. Visitors who came to the sanctuary were captivated by the sight of a massive lion still nuzzling his Labrador mother. They watched as Koda, despite his size and strength, remained as gentle as ever with Daisy. But behind their beautiful bond lay a painful truth, one that the sanctuary never let people forget. Koda was never meant to be here. He should have been in the wild, with his real pride, learning how to survive as a lion. But he never got that chance. Poachers took it from him. Jack, the ranger who had rescued Koda that fateful night, often stood by the sanctuary's observation deck, watching the visitors' reactions. He saw their smiles, their wonder, but he also made sure they understood the bigger picture. Koda is one of the lucky ones, Jack would say. Most orphaned cubs don't make it. Every year, thousands of lion cubs are left motherless due to poaching and illegal wildlife trade. Some are taken for captivity, others starve, unable to fend for themselves. Koda's survival was a miracle, but miracles shouldn't be the only thing keeping these animals alive. The sanctuary used Koda's story to educate visitors about the impact of habitat destruction, poaching, and human-wildlife conflict. Schools brought children to learn about conservation efforts, and many of them left inspired, some even vowing to become rangers themselves. But perhaps the greatest lesson came from Koda and Daisy's bond, a reminder that love and kindness can transcend species, and that animals, just like humans, feel loss, fear, and love. At the entrance of the sanctuary, a new plaque was added beneath Koda and Daisy's photo. Protect the wild, protect the future. Because for every Koda, there were thousands of others still waiting for their chance to survive. The story of Koda and Daisy is more than just an unusual friendship. It's a reminder of the power of love, resilience, and kindness. In a world often divided by differences, their bond teaches us that true family isn't always about blood. It's about love, protection, and standing by each other no matter what. Koda lost his mother to cruelty and greed, yet he found a second chance in an unexpected place. Daisy, without hesitation, welcomed him as her own, proving that sometimes the most profound acts of kindness come from the least expected sources. If a lion and a dog can form a family, then surely we as humans can find more ways to be compassionate toward one another. But Koda's story is also a wake-up call. He was one of the lucky ones, but how many others never get that chance? It reminds us of the importance of protecting the world we leave behind, for our children, for nature, and for the creatures who share this planet with us. In the end, Koda and Daisy's bond is a simple but powerful message. Love knows no boundaries, and kindness, no matter how small, can change a life forever. Koda and Daisy's story is a testament to the incredible bonds that can form when love and kindness triumph over fear and loss. Their journey reminds us that compassion knows no limits, and even the most unlikely friendships can change lives. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to join us in sharing more powerful stories of friendship, loyalty, and resilience.